Whenever we go in and we pitch and we talk to any size business and say, you need this, they might get sticker shock. Well, the person that gets sticker shock tends to be the person who's...
Thank you again for taking the time to meet with us. It's an honor to have you as a guest in Tech Break by Friday pod. You have an experience of almost 2 decades with translating how technical design and delivery gives business value, and you're helping organizations with compliance. I would like to give us a bit of a brief introduction about yourself, about your experience, and let's start from there.
Oh, absolutely. You're right. I have about 20 years of experience in disaster recovery. Back when I started, we were using tapes and products like ArcServe and whatnot, and that was very tedious. Being a system admin for probably about 5 years in there, a big part of our job became recovery, and I actually went to work for a recovery company, and that particular company did file level backup, which worked really great at the time. But in recovering people's data, we realized pretty quickly there was a big shortfall. People didn't just need a file, they needed their whole system. And so in my career, we started experiencing with different ways to physically to virtual or physical to physical entire systems. And that kind of birthed me in there. And so I've been kicking around for a very long time. Currently, my main area of specialty is compliance, like you said. I work for a large law firm, but also focusing around different products, specifically Veeam, I think is the winner in this instance. With Veeam, I'm a Veeam Vanguard. And then also I love immutable storage technologies in there. So I'm also an object first ace. And I spent a lot of time taking the technical that people use all the time and really have the executive conversations. How do we recover? When do we recover? Crisis management, those sorts of things. So that's my background. I translate the tech into practical business solution.
And I think that's something that should translate the return on investment that businesses should see from tech. Most of the times, trust is not built when everything is going well, I would say. It's going to be built when something is breaking or when there is chaos. How does a user-centric design change the way a business recovers from a disaster compared to some old school approach?
Oh, absolutely. I don't even know that it's an old school approach when we think about it. I think many times it's an engineering process versus a business process. So when we talk about an old school theory or the engineering, we're thinking about if this system fails, how do we recover it? If this SAN goes down, what do we do? If we lose this host, this VM, how do we do it? When we start shifting into user-centric design, that's really critical and moves us to kind of a top-down level recovery strategy. So you start looking at different systems together, bundled, and you decide, well, if this, say, app goes down, what do I do to recover it? Really, I like to think about things in terms of legal because I think it's an easy narrative to follow. When we look at user-centric, we even get into, business impact analysis, a BIA, if you will. So in the legal world, we think about lawyers who bill all the time, and it costs however many dollars per hour for these lawyers to bill. When we start looking user-centric, instead of saying, well, we lost this storage array, and now we have the inability to bill customers, and we have the inability to invoice customers. Often someone will say, well, it's very important to get an invoice out. Well, is that more important than continuing billing? No, because every hour you're down and you're not billing, say, in a law firm or professional services, you're losing revenue coming in. So you do the business impact analysis with user-centric, and you start saying, I need the systems up that are going to allow us to continue billing. We're going to need email. We're going to need files. We're going to need phones. We're going to need time tracking utilities. And those coming up, and legal libraries and such coming up first, allow the revenue stream to continue. And then we can think secondary about sending out invoices. An accountant would tell us, well, you want to watch your accounts receivable cycles, let's say, because it might look poor on the accounting side. But in the end, revenue weighs higher. So user-centric is very important, and it also comes down to that impact of revenue. If we flip back to the old school, we wouldn't care about what the end user would do. We would look simply at what system is down. Well, this SAN is down. We would recover the SAN, the host. What we wouldn't be paying attention to is what's needed to drive the business. That's why it's so important to do user-centric. That restores confidence in people as well. I don't know how many times when you do the old outcomes, you would spend a lot of time bringing up that SAN, bringing up that host, and you're still in an everything down state. And then you move to the next layer, everything down. And at the very end, everything comes up. Instead of targeting specific systems, getting the workforce going back. Because those employees and users and customers are using those systems, the quicker the return to operation, the more confidence that's restored in the outage.
Yeah, I think that's right. Also, when you're building for users, you're also building for the product as well at the end of the day, or the service you're providing. You're building it towards customer satisfaction, which makes a lot of sense from a product perspective. Most of my listeners are focused on optimization, and a lot of the times continuity seems to be like an insurance cost, that someone would say. Can you please share an example with us of where it's better to invest in recovery workflows directly to improve from the bottom line, or that they have saved, for example, a project from a complete disaster, as we would say?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it comes down to the architecture of the resilience. When we look at doing certain technologies, there's a cost factor to it. When we don't assign a cost value, everybody says we need continuous data protection. Everything has to be an instant dual write. It must come up. And we don't weigh the cost behind there. We don't weigh the infrastructure costs or the hardware costs to be able to have redundant systems in there. That's why going back to the executive case is so important to understand. What is the tiering of my business? What is a tier 1, 2, 3? What are the acceptable recovery times? What are the recovery points that we need to look at? And ultimately adding in immutability in there. I think the number one investment area people need to look at when they look at resilience is multiple copies and making sure they're immuted, or that they cannot easily be deleted. Today's world, we rarely build systems that do not have power redundancies or host redundancies. Everything we build today is redundant. What we're not thinking about is what we call the insider threat. And that's why this immutability concept is so important, is that someone comes in, impersonates an employee with credentialing. They could be stealth for several years. Then they start the encryption ransom process. When you start bringing in immutability, both on-premise, like with an object-first device, or some Linux flavors, there's pure storage. I mean, many vendors make it, but we make it immuted and close to the source. When somebody comes in with credentialing and somebody layers in and gets into your backup environment and starts going into the backup software and starts deleting those backups, the immutability prevents it. You have to have another vector to come into. The best investment is the immutability, followed second by this, honestly. You have to have the business continuity disaster recovery plan regularly documented and tested. Sometimes the automations in there are more important, not just within your software. So a lot of your software vendors like Veeam has Veeam Recovery Orchestrator. You can preset recoveries and scans and the technologies there. But going back to our ITIL foundations, if you think about it, it's people, process, and technology. We often overlook and lay everything on technology, and we forget, what is our process? Who are our people? So for example, what is an incident? Who calls the incident? When it happens, how do you contact the appropriate staff? There's a myriad of software tools that you can layer in there. So when that designated person says this is an outage and we need to open up a bridge, click, emails are out, texts are out, bridges are open, Teams meetings are going, etc. All the players are coming in, and then you automatically have, what do we do in there? Do we use our software with automation? But we have an actual run book to follow, and that should be regularly updated and tested as well. Your backups too. I mean, plan and your backups are worthless without testing, and that really brings the resilience.
Yeah, I think that's something that we tend to hear a lot with cloud incidents that they were happening some time back, especially when people were deleting some sort of databases and then they were just finding out, oh, okay, there was a actual chaos because they didn't have a backup on that. So yeah, I agree, you're totally right. You have mentioned that there is a complexity trap that most of the times is overwhelming for a lot of teams. What is the biggest mistake that someone technical as a founder makes when they are trying to protect their data, but they are actually tend to increase the risk instead of true and simple of what to follow? They tend to be too complex about that.
I agree with you. We try to implement too many complex systems, too many integrations that are not native, so we have to write our own code bases, and it becomes highly specific. We buy a software package, let's say a ServiceNow or something, and we go through and we add all these customized fields in here. And when we have to do recoveries, it's not just a simple failback. Or if we have to do an upgrade, it's not a simple upgrade. We have to hire our guru to come in and fix some things in there. So complexity can be a really bad thing. Sometimes you have to find a more generic tool that does a multitude of things in a good sense. It may not be everything you need. It may not check every box to 99th percentile, but maybe going back to our SMART goals and thinking that 90% is close. When it comes to designing the disaster recovery, the thing that I find that is the most complex in here is founders tend to rely on one person, and it becomes almost like a hostage situation. If you've ever read the Phoenix Project, you'll understand where the different roles we see in an organization, one person in technology tends to become the hostage taker. Without this person, the whole plan goes aside. And that's what we looked at probably 10 years ago, was saying hostage situation. And I still think that's the case. This is a little bit more realistic, I think, in organizations, is we have to talk about employee turnover. The people that are designing the disaster recovery, who are running these systems, who are making the plans and testing all of these things, may not even be in your organization anymore. Often when we design these plans, I like to think of Superman. I don't remember who told me this story, but they said the same thing to me. They said, think about Superman. You have Clark Kent, the average mild-mannered man who just sits there in disguise working in the organization. And then when the epic outage happens, they turn into Superman, and all of a sudden they have these amazing powers to fix everything. Well, with employee turnover, you don't know this, but your Clark Kent may have moved, because you won't know Clark Kent until he becomes Superman. But what if in your employee turnover, Clark Kent has already gone somewhere else? So you need continuity even in your DR plans of making sure that you can identify those Clark Kents sitting in your organization today. So that's a real mistake I think founders make. And the second thing would be this: it's really difficult to find somebody that has real experience in the area of disaster recovery. The challenge is when you do find them, they tend to be very expensive because they're so specialized. A great disaster recovery consultant or person may not be a full-time staff position, but it's something you want to look at in a fractional standpoint. They can work a few hours a month. They can make sure that you're up to date and roadmapped and protected. And while they're only there, say 10 hours a month, the amount of time that they bring you in efficiency will outweigh just someone making it up as they go along.
Yeah, and that's, I think, something that a lot of companies need to think in what to invest. It was also the same with Gordon Robinson's episode that he was explaining on why people need to invest even early on in cybersecurity. It's an important part of actually maintaining your company's infrastructure, especially if you are in tech. I really appreciate stories, and one part of this podcast is that we focus also a bit a story from your experience. So could you share with us maybe an instance, not the actual specifics, but like of a perfect continuity plan failed because of human behavior? Is also something that happens a lot with real people in cybersecurity as well. Most of the times people say that the weakest link is humans against humans and not the actual systems.
Oh, you're right. And this goes back to the people, process, and technology analogy from earlier. People are wonderful, but they need to be held up, kind of the three-legged stool that we talk about many times. People, process, and technology, all three make it work. And if you just lean on one leg, it falls over. So when I think about the kind of perfect plan that failed based off of humans, in my experience, I've seen where people sit down and they become overwhelmed with enacting disaster recovery and security. It becomes a monumental task, and they don't know where to start. They kind of suffer from paralysis of analysis, as they say. So in the real world, somebody may purchase the backup software. They may go ahead and purchase the cybersecurity suite, and they spend so much time trying to architect it to get it right before they ever start implementing even a baseline protection. It causes issues. So one time I had a customer who did go ahead and work with us to architect a solution, and before they went to put it in, and this happens a lot, but this customer, it really got them pretty bad, was they wanted to do other upgrades in their infrastructure to make sure that when the backup systems went in place, they would work perfectly. Rather than taking our recommendation of perhaps we should put in what works today, and then we can roadmap to the future while other upgrades are going along. Well, this customer opted to not implement, and they had a salesperson that was traveling, and this particular salesperson left their laptop in a rental car. And rather than tell the employer, they didn't say anything, but lo and behold, someone from the rental car company said, "Oh, dear sir, we found your laptop." This employee was so relieved, and he didn't tell anybody. What's he do? He goes back to his desk, plugs it in, boom, inserts malware everywhere. We get a panic-stricken call from the customer. "Can you please help us? We're being ransomed. It's millions of dollars. We think we've isolated the threat to this laptop, but can we start getting some level of backups?" And the answer was no, because we didn't put it in. And that was a challenge they had. So the best time to start doing your implementation is actually yesterday. Get something in place. I mean, the reality check to this all is disaster recovery does not exist without security. Security does not exist without disaster recovery. They are hand in hand. It's that whole cyber kill chain methodology. You can protect your network, and then when the protection fails, you have disaster recovery. You can have disaster recovery, but it won't work without it being protected with cybersecurity. So that's our reality check there is the perfect plan doesn't need to be perfect sometimes. It needs to just get done and then ramped up.
That's right. That's unbelievable story, like complete disaster on their end. But yeah, if they have implemented that sooner, they would have at least some sort of recovery ability. You have worked, I think, mostly in regulated enterprises, but some of our listeners tend to run smaller companies and agencies. What would be some sort of recommendation for them on what would be the minimum viable plan that they should have on any disaster like this? How could a small business say, okay, like today or from yesterday, as you said before, as you mentioned, I'm doing 1, 2, 3.
Absolutely. I've worked with small businesses. Some of my clients today are on the smaller side as well. So it's all over the map. The baseline is this. First, you have to choose the right software to back up. I'm a Veeam Vanguard. The reason why I'm with Veeam, I'm not paid to say the word Veeam, but I've been around long enough to try software, and it's many solutions out there, and they just don't work to me. So whatever you're going to choose, I recommend Veeam. They have some really great pricing out there. It's really come down. So find the right software. Beyond that, what you need to look at is the concept we call the Veeam zip code. And this applies to any backups, really. We like to say 32110. So for the listeners out there, that's 3 copies of our data, 2 different locations, 1 off-site, 1 immuted or unable to be deleted, and 0 errors on it. So that's your architecture there. So what are we looking at? Something locally at the site that will back up, something that will then send it off-site, something that has some sort of what they call air gap or immutability. In other words, if you go into the software that backs up, you should not be able to go to that target and delete it in the software or browse to it at all. You should be testing quarterly. If you can do it automated, that's great, because in an emergency, you are going to face so many things that you haven't thought about. It's not just recovering your system. You're going to maybe have to recover an accounting package and realize in the same outage, the phone system isn't working. So the more you can automate, better. But that really comes to the last stages. At least go through it, document it. Where is everything there? Network maps are really great. System maps are really good. Documenting what you have to make sure who can recover things. I'll use an accounting example. Sometimes a customer will call in and say, well, my name is Joni and I'm from accounting and I need to go ahead and have this whole server recovered. Well, Joni was the accounts receivable clerk. Joni wasn't really in IT. You didn't need a full server restore. So you need to say who can restore, who can communicate it, what are their roles? Are they a billing admin? Are they a technical admin? Can they call an emergency? You want to have that. And really on every system out there, you really need to have multi-factor on every desktop, every workstation, every every server out there, any application that can do it. And I know it's really, really annoying to have 4 or 5 different authentication apps, but you can start streamlining them in. Like off the top of my head, I like Duo. I can add in most any kind of stack in there, and now those apps back up. So if you lose your Duo, you can recover your Duo. I believe Microsoft Authenticator does that as well. So multi-factor, that's going to stop other people from getting in. But just remember the zip code. This is what I want to end with. It sounds really weird, but 32110. 3 copies, local, off-site, immutable, right? If you delete one, you have other places you can be. You know, you want to have different media types in there. You're stacking and layering. The reason is this: while no software out there is perfect, multiple copies are going to save you in multiple locations, and making sure that even you yourself can't delete it, as weird as that is. Companies like Wasabi and iDrive, they absolutely have software out there that's very low cost that can immute right with Veeam, and you're going to pay $6-7 a terabyte out there, and you'll be safe. You can add on other softwares that will add on the automation, and that's kind of where I get to with a lot of customers. Is it's the integrations, and that's where I help them. It's the Veeam software, it's with this provider, here's your bill, a little bit of configuration, and then it's a set it and forget it. It runs, it's safe, it's automated, and you have that compliance report. You have something that says this has really happened, this is really tested, and you don't have to worry about it, because every day, you know, I get a report that says good, bad, or ugly. I get a testing report monthly or quarterly, good, bad, or ugly. And then you know where to go, because once that machine is up and running, it's great. And the only thing you need to do is quarterly review it. At some point, you add new systems or remove. So you should look at it periodically. But that's what it comes down to: is the minimum viable is get it protected, multiple copies, safely immuted.
Thank you. That's something that's really valuable for a lot of our listeners who are not aware of the huge risk that they are taking without having this system enabled. As a last question for you, you are working in the compliance sector. How do you see that the AI attacks will go in the future? And why do you think that compliance is now even more necessary than it was before?
Well, compliance is so important, especially with AI. I mean, AI is just turbocharging what was the hacker. When I started in computing, the hacker average age was high school age, living at home, didn't need to work, could play around on the internet. And now you take AI and there's infinite bots able to go ahead and penetrate and do things. So when it comes to compliancies, you have to make sure that you're testing and it's documented. The main point to me with compliance is it gives us the transparency to know something was done. If you hire a vendor and you tell them, I'm going to pay you to set up a backup and I'm going to pay you to test it, and they never give you any compliance reports, was it really done? You have to move to the zero trust model. When we look at compliancy frameworks, what we're doing is getting some hive knowledge. We're saying this type of entity looks similar to you. They face these challenges across, say, 2,000 enterprises or 2,000 small businesses, whatever it may be. They face similar challenges, but we have 2,000 different flavors of it, and we've modeled this down to these key areas. And if you follow this script, you're going to knock out 95% of your problem. That's what's wonderful about compliance. Outside of that, it's the data leak side, what's going where, what's touching. But as much as we see AI as a bad actor, we're also seeing companies like Veeam just bought Security and Security AI, and behind the scenes, this is doing the opposite of the bad actor. This is the good actor AI. This is scanning your network and looking for where are your gaps and compliances, where are your missing machines, where are your HIPAA shop, do you have this policy? And it's bringing it together to actually become a positive actor in there. Outside of that, the things that we're looking for with AI internally, we're making sure we're not pumping all our information into chat GPTs and Groks and whatnot. We don't want to put our data out there. It's got to be anonymized. So a lot of times we were building learning language models internally to be able to do these things as well. So as much as everybody gets on the bad actor kick, what I would say is why it's so dangerous with the AI side is because it's so scalable. It's so smart to learn. It's self-healing and growing and ebbing and flowing. You just can't compete with that in the scale that it is. It's just mind-boggling. So that's kind of where I think even choosing the right backup software is correct, is you have to look to say, what good actors do they have in the AI space? Because we need to work with AI to go compete against AI. At the end of the day, this is how I will sum up everybody's backup and disaster recovery. And you spoke to this a little earlier. It's insurance. Let's face it, whenever we go in and we pitch and we talk to any size business and say, you need this, they might get sticker shock. Well, the person that gets sticker shock tends to be the person who's never been through the incident. I can immediately tell when someone's been through a bad situation, when suddenly they're like, we don't care, we just need this. Once you've been through the bad situation without the insurance coverage, you never want to go through that again, because you understand how much it costs you. It literally can put you out of business. That's how important this topic of disaster recovery and compliance is. This is your business. This is what you're dealing with. It's probably one of the most important things ever. It's kind of like a small businessman 50 years ago. If there was a small office fire and it destroyed every file, every paperwork that they ever had to every contact of every customer, they would not come out of it. That's how valuable your data is. So while you might think resilience is keeping it turned on, I would say resilience is really the ability to bring it back, because people out there listening, this is not an if it happens. This is a when it happens. It is going to happen to you. That is what the entire industry says all over. Even Microsoft with Office 365. You are the steward of your data. Are you backing it up? And we tend to forget that sometimes. So it's a great segment for AI. It's working for us and against us.
Yeah, that's right. And I also like that you brought in the optimistic side. It's not that it's always the bad actor. We also have people that are using it to advance the optimistic and the good side of AI into all of these tools. Yeah, I really appreciate what you have explained to us today so far. I think all of this was packed with a lot of value for our listeners and exactly what they need to do in order to achieve compliance, but also have a plan in mind, not just like something random. Have a plan in mind. As my last question, where can people find you?
Oh, absolutely. You can find me at my website, DifferentDev.com. So that's different, DEV.com. That's the best way to get me. You'll find everything there. You can email me, tom.may@differentdev.com. I'm on LinkedIn, of course. And basically, I'm the founder and chief architect consultant for Different Dev, but we have teams behind us. And don't think you're too small for us. Don't think you're too big for us. I seriously have small dentist offices clients. I have multinational manufacturing. It's all over the map, and because it's the same architecture. It's just a scale difference, and we can help you in any way, shape, or form.
That's great. Happy to hear that. Thank you a lot for your time. It has been a great pleasure having you, and I really appreciate taking the time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much.
This podcast was recorded with Wiserwork. Wiserwork is an AI meeting assistant powered by 100 Mentors.